Hey everybody, Pat and Doug here again, and we are back with another episode of the Wealthy Fitness Entrepreneur. And today we're going to talk business model, and really the foundation of everything that we want to do as a business owner. So Doug's going to do the heavy lifting today and do most of what we're going to cover. So Doug, let's get to it.
Yeah, so I think as an intro, it's important to understand there's really only 5 models in this industry that we've seen over the last 2 decades scale. And when I say scale, I mean be done at a successful level where you have your ideal business, you're able to have freedom to leave without the business stopping, things like that. So the 5 models, real quick, are one-on-one high-end personal training, still a model, and still in certain markets can be done really well. Semi-private, which we're going to consider semi-private individualized programming, and typically done in a 3 or 4 to 1 ratio. Above that would be your small group model. That is 4 to 6. We have yet to see a model that is small group, meaning you're still able to personalize the program above a ratio of 6. Once you get above 6, that tends to be it kind of feels like a class, and we can't really personalize it, so we can't sell that personal training experience. So that would be the third model. And we still have the group classes. Just understand, I think the most important thing as of today with group classes is to understand that is the model that you're competing most with franchises. So you do have to have a differentiator, whether that be in market or in the deliverable, in the community component, the relationship component, and that is a very volume heavy as far as each class needs to have, in the teens. And then the 5th model, which I would say most of our listeners don't even consider, not even that you should, but just know that it is still a proven model, which is the health club open access, right? We're seeing, big names like the Anytimes and the Planet Fitnesses that still do the open access model really well. So those are the 5 models that we've seen scale.
Yeah. So the interesting thing about this is all 5 can transcend geography, right? Like, so they can be the lens through, like Doug was viewing them, the offline model. But if you look at online coaching businesses, I mean, big membership sites are essentially the equivalent of a big box gym, all the way down to one-on-one personal training, but done in a virtual setting. So it doesn't matter if you want to be online, offline. I mean, we have plenty of people who have a foundation of an offline business, but then instead of scaling to a second physical location, they do a virtual location as their second piece of the puzzle. So yeah, the nice thing about this is I think there's some simplicity. It's just most people, they think there's a blank canvas when in reality all the successful models have they fall into one of these 5 buckets.
For sure. And when you're choosing which model to run, if you're already operating in business, which if you're listening to this, you most likely are, we have to have some awareness that we probably at least need to audit, is our model that we're currently running the best model that we should be running? Because you could have started like I did 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and when I opened the gym, I did classes. I did what was probably some version of semi-private with personalized programming. I mean, you did everything. You threw it against the wall and see what stuck. And over time, just evolve into, understanding both from a market competitiveness, what model you want to run, right? You ideally want to pick a model where in your market, you can be the best at that model. You don't necessarily even need to be the only, you just need to pick a model where you legitimately can be the best at that model. And so that's where I say things like a class model, it can be hard to be the best at that when you're competing against franchises that are dumping thousands every month into their marketing and have incredible design and aesthetic. It's hard to compete against compared to, something like a one-on-one high-end or a semi-private small group model. Those, in most markets, you can be very competitive because the franchises aren't doing them, and the people that are doing them are typically not doing them at any kind of consistent way where you're building relationships. So looking at the market, I think is a place to start. And then also looking at who do you want on your team? Do you want a big team? Do you want a small team? I mean, at this level, you're looking to scale your business and at least work your ideal role, whether that involves coaching or not, working your ideal role. And so if that involves a smaller team or a larger team, a lot of that's going to be your choice. And certain models are going to require bigger teams. A semi-private model where you not only have individualized programming that you're probably going to have some labor towards, and then of course only being able to work with 3 clients to 4 clients at a time. If you really want to grow that into a couple hundred client base, you're going to have several trainers, as opposed to a class model where you could have a part-timer in the morning, a part-timer at night, and that's really your staff to operate that business model. So those are some of the considerations I would have when you're choosing your model, or potentially at this level, having the awareness to audit the model that you're currently running.
So how many coaches do you have with a business of your size now?
So we have 6 coaches, and I think a good ratio that I use in the training gym for most of the models, certainly not applicable for one-on-one and open access, but if you look at those kind of 3 in the middle, somewhere between 60 clients and 75 clients to 1 full-time equivalent is a good ratio when you look at how many clients you want. So if you want 150 clients as your ideal business, you're probably going to need 2, maybe 2.5 coaches. And when I say 2, I'm talking full-time equivalent. So for clarity, that doesn't mean you need to only have 2 full-timers. That may be 2 part-timers in the morning and 2 part-timers at night, and together it's a full-time equivalent. So that's the ratio in that 60 to 75 to 1 client to coach ratio that we look at overall.
What's interesting is that it's probably not terribly different than even when I had a predominantly one-on-one business. We had 14 coaches at our peak, but about half of them were part-time. Mm-hmm. So, it's still, even at that kind of scope in one-on-one, it wasn't a dramatically different ratio.
Yeah. So from a once you've chosen the model and you've chosen how do I stand out, this is the model I'm going to run with, this is the model I'm going to operate. Some other kind of pieces that we want to have in place within the model is looking at the actual facility that you operate in, assuming your brick and mortar. Obviously, that this isn't a consideration necessarily for the online space, but for those of us scaling a physical brick and mortar location, your facility should match your model. And some things to just consider would be, if you want to operate a large group model, you're generally going to need a lot more square footage, because a large group model is done best with 15, 20, 25 people at one time, and that's not going to work in 1,500 square feet, right? As a rough rule of thumb, we carve out about 150 square feet per client. Now, I'm not saying we're, putting a physical 150 square feet boxed off, but as a rough rule of thumb, if you have a 1,500 square foot studio, divide that by 150, 10 people is probably going to be pretty tight in that studio. As opposed to, you get up to 3,000, now you can fit 20. And so making sure your model matches at 3,000 square feet, maybe you could run a group class of 20 people every hour, and it's a good solid base. But matching the facility size to the model, also helpful audit when you're considering, if you have a lease coming up for renewal and you're looking at another location, or you're looking at expanding your model or expanding your facility size, and your model supports, say a need for you want to have 200 clients. Well, again, that's probably not going to work in 1,500 square feet, but it also could work in 3,000, and you don't need to go get a 5,000 square foot facility. So figuring out that sweet spot with your facility capacity to match that model.
Yeah, I think that what's interesting is it's almost like people kind of cobble this stuff together, right? I know in a recent email I wrote about thinking about how I would have built a clubhouse or a fort in the woods. It's like, man, you just kind of piece things together. You accrue things as you go. Whereas here, we're building, we're essentially kind of designing, like an architect, we're designing what we want to have. Mm-hmm. And by using these ratios, by deciding the role you want to play, deciding the model that not only you want to have, but has the best chance of being successful in the market, the odds of being successful and scalable and allow you to kind of evolve your role to where you want to be, or if you want to replicate, if you want to kind of back yourself out of some of the day-to-day coaching, whatever it is, you just have such a better kind of platform to build off of, rather than just saying, hey, you know what, I'm going to do large group, and then you go try to find a facility and then wedge whatever programming you have in mind into whatever space is available, without giving any consideration to what actually makes makes sense financially, but then also makes sense from a client experience standpoint.
For sure. So there's three kind of final components that I would look at with perfecting the model, which is how are we scheduling the clients that are that are experiencing this model, because scheduling is certainly a big component of the fitness business, and we want to make sure it's both efficient for the model but also efficient for the client and easy. So I can touch on scheduling. Programming, not so much the X's and the O's, but the operational side of programming in that model, and then how we're reaching out to clients outside of the gym, right? So in regards to scheduling, there's two kind of key components that we want to have in place. Number one is having a scheduling rhythm at which you audit and release your schedule. So I would caution you to just have this open-ended schedule, not because it's going to drastically change each month, but simply by having a rhythm, whether it's monthly or quarterly, that you release your schedule. It allows you internally to pause and say, is this the schedule I want to release? Is there a time that needs to make a shift? Is there somebody that's away a week during this time frame where the schedule is going to be slightly different? It avoids those last minute changes where, hey, next week we're not going to have a 6 a.m. because so-and-so is on vacation, versus if, on the 15th of the month, you're releasing the next month's schedule, you already know, hey, that 6 a.m. is going to have to tweak, or teachers maybe during the school year flood a after school hour, but you may not need that time slot during the summer. Whether it's quarterly or monthly, having some type of schedule release is helpful operationally for the model, but also building excitement for the clients. We can use things almost tying in some marketing strategy to build excitement for the next month's schedule, the next quarter's schedule, almost if you kind of look at the concert ticket model is the example I use there. The other side of it would be your wait list, and having a clear wait list process within the schedule. So most clients in training gyms are signing up for time slots, and we just want to have, especially as you scale at this level, you're going to be running into capacity issues at each time, and the popular times. And the wait list is a way not only to handle that turnover that happens naturally with people's change of schedule, but also it shows you on the schedule, if you're having a consistent wait list, that's probably a time that needs to go underneath the microscope and say, can we run 2 sessions at that time? How do we increase capacity at that time? So that would be some filters that I would look at for scheduling. For programming, it's within the model, obviously you have your own programming philosophy with the X's and O's. I think when we look at it at a 40,000 foot view with programming, it's making sure we have a programming system that is not dependent on different trainers writing different programs. We're all using the same language. We're all pulling from the same library. So even if you are running a semi-private model where people are writing individualized programs, that's totally fine. And in fact, in most markets, a very good differentiator. However, we want to make sure we're all pulling from the same library. We're all using the same template. So it's not Joe's program, it's the fitness company's program. So that's certainly a consideration with programming. And then same thing with scheduling, like we talked on scheduling, you can use that same kind of marketing approach with programming, where every month or whatever your rhythm is, if it's every 4 weeks, every month, every 6 weeks, your client should know when a new programming is being released, because it allows you to market and draw excitement to it. So scheduling, programming, and then just to wrap up, The final thing I would audit with your model is how you're reaching out to those clients outside of the gym. So what is your accountability within that model? Accountability has to look different for each model because if you're connecting with clients at a one-to-one level outside of the gym, that can get very stressful and frankly not probably operationally possible if you have a large group training business with 200 clients paying $129 a month. Operationally, you're not going to have the staff and frankly the margin to deliver that. And at the same time, if they're paying $99 a week, $400 a month, they're in that semi-private model, we probably want to have a tighter relationship with them, which certainly happens in the training session, but can also happen in that other 165, those hours outside the gym. So those are the three kind of scheduling, programming, and accountability that I would look to wrap up perfecting your model.
So the only thing that I would kind of tack on to what you just covered is, for most of the people who are listening to this podcast, you've got a business, you hopefully have a successful, healthy business, but it's always a challenge to change, right? Like, I think that most of us are hesitant to evolve, and sometimes even successful business owners, they start to second guess themselves, worrying about the consequences of this. Hey, am I going to have a mass exodus? Are people going to complain? How's this going to work? I would encourage you to kind of view this considering two things. The first is, you're going to always continue to evolve. You probably have evolved your marketing. You've probably evolved your role. It's okay to evolve your model. I think that we all have we should all give ourselves permission to see if there's a better way to do something, to move to that. We are not always tethered to however we started. The second thing that I would tell you is that you're the one who convinced people, without ever experiencing it, very early on to enroll in what you currently do. You're the one who got them to buy into that being the best way. Well, at this point, you likely have more influence with them. You have a stronger track record. You have a deeper relationship. So because of that, you may have the ability to move them to the next thing if you say, look, hey, I've been doing a deep dive on this. I've investigated. I feel like that we could do an even better job for the clients that we serve. Here's how this is going to work. I believe that if you could get them the first time at with the type of relationship you had there, then you certainly have the ability to move them to the next thing if you truly deem it is the right thing for you and your business.
Agree.
All right. Well, Doug, another good one in the books. I'm glad we got to talk through models, since I think that a lot of people kind of stumble into the model that they have rather than doing it strategically. And if you want to build your ideal business, if you want to become a wealthy fitness entrepreneur, being strategic and executing your plan is certainly the way to go.